Addiction is a chronic disease. Millions of people worldwide suffer from substance and behavioral addictions. An addict's life is often unmanageable, leaving the addict and his or her family and friends feeling completely powerless over the disease. Without treatment, addiction can result in disability or premature death. You are listening to Making an Addict. My name is D.J. Burr, and I'm an addict in long-term recovery. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, behavioral addiction specialist, and best-selling author of I Just Wanted Love, Recovery of a Codependent Sex and Love Addict, now available on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. I intend to bring you different perspectives about addiction from various sources, including other addicts in recovery, clinicians who treat recovering addicts, and family and friends of addicts to discover what makes an addict. Listener discretion is advised. To learn more about this podcast, check us out at makinganaddict.com or follow me on social media at DJBurr1022 on Facebook, the DJ Burr on Instagram, and at DJBurr1022 on Twitter. Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another episode of Making an Addict. This week I am talking with Lisa Dewey, who's a therapist in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And she and I are talking about a lot of things, particularly around what it's like to work with people who are mandated by the courts, what it's like to work with teens, and what it means for families who are struggling with addiction. So sit back, relax, and listen to the show. And remember, give me some feedback on social media. I truly appreciate it. Welcome to today's show. I'm talking with Lisa, and Lisa is a therapist in private practice, and she's going to tell us a bit more about herself. And she and I are going to have a conversation today about what makes an addict. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you, DJ. Happy to be here.
I'm so glad.
I am Lisa Dewey. My name is spelled D-U-E-Z, but it's pronounced Dewey. It's a strange little quirk. I'm in private practice in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I've been on my own for about 6 months, but I have about 20 years of experience working in the field. Started working with folks in recovery in the criminal justice system, and then moved on to do it as a clinical social worker. So I worked with kids, adults, women, people with, most recently, people with opioid addiction issues. And I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you. It sounds like you have a wide range of experience. Do you have a particular population that you work really well with?
I do like to work with everyone, but I have a heart for working with women in recovery.
Okay.
I have a special heart for working with women in recovery.
Well, I'm just going to dive right in. What brings people to you? What are they working on?
Usually, sometimes they come because they have to, and sometimes somebody makes them come to treatment because sometimes they have been involved in the court system, and so they are mandated to get help. And so there is a good percentage of those folks that come there. And then sometimes they just come because they just know that things are not right. And they want to stop. They don't know how. And they just need some guidance. And we try to provide that through individual and group therapy.
Okay. And so you run groups as well?
I do.
Okay. Interesting. So can you talk about what are the early things that you address in treatment with people who are dealing with addiction? Are they bringing in stuff about family of origin? Do they have any idea about that? Or they're coming in saying, hey, this judge says I got to stop using and that's all I'm focused on?
The first, it's funny because if it's a mandated client, the first thing is, hey, this judge said I need to be here, or they follow it up with, and I want to stop, and I don't know how, and I've been using for X amount of years, and so the focus is, I think, first for me is to try to help them stop, to get them onto a kind of a recovery plan. What supports do they have? Family support, job, any kind of external factors that will help. What's going well, because I think they come in a little defeated. So we see what we can build on. Personally, I try to help to get them to. I want them to stop using because I feel like with a co-occurring client, they're not much that, I think you have to address the substance abuse first, and then I think you address, once they stop using, all of the reasons why they're using starts to come out, and then that's the other part that we work with.
Okay, and just for our folks who may not know our clinical language, could you tell us what co-occurring means?
Oh, sure. So co-occurring is a kind of a clinical language when we say someone has a mental health diagnosis and a substance abuse problem, or it could be a mental health diagnosis and an intellectual disability. So there's something, and there's two focuses of treatment, but mostly what I see is mental health diagnosis and a substance abuse problem. And so we would treat both. There's a lot of schools of thought out there that say most people that have a substance abuse diagnosis also have an underlying mental health diagnosis. There's a lot of people that believe that now.
Interesting. Yeah, I have treated folks with a variety of addiction issues, and I have worked with people who are addressing the co-occurring issues with the mental health and the substance, or the process, which is a behavioral issue that they may be addicted to. And do you educate people about their mental illness and the substance piece, or is that like, do you work with someone else that comes in and kind of educates and does like psychoeducation?
I think treatment is, no, I do that because I want people to, I think it's power. I think it's powerful for people to understand. I never diagnose someone without talking to them about what is their diagnosis and what are the symptoms and why that particular diagnosis is something that they have, and do they agree with it? Because sometimes they may not see that. I educate on the process of addiction, what happens, how it becomes kind of a cycle. And I feel like, I think that the learning, the treatment process almost starts at the psychoeducational level, because the more they understand, the more they learn and they understand. I think it begins like, okay, on that level, how can I stop this now that I understand the nuts and bolts of it?
Yeah, that's important information for us to talk about. What contributes to someone becoming an addict, or someone who's addicted to a behavior and or a substance. What are your thoughts?
I have this thing is that humans culturally, any person, I think we want to feel good when we're, it goes back to that self-soothing behavior. So I want to feel good. I find something that makes me feel good. I feel bad. I do something that makes me feel good. And it's a very simple, I know it's very much more complicated than that, but I think when we learn that, a certain behavior or a certain substance, takes away pain, I think that's how I do believe that's how it starts. And I've seen it in treatment where, as people move through the process, they'll say, well, I was tired of the anxiety. I was tired of feeling depressed. I was tired of hearing the voices. I needed to self-medicate, and so the treatment process becomes teaching different ways to feel good almost.
Yeah.
To feel imbalanced.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I'm curious if someone has ever asked you, have they ever said, Lisa, is my anxiety the reason I have an addiction? Or is my trauma the reason I have an addiction?
Yeah, I think they have. I think they've, maybe not in so many words, but they've said, I have had this happen to me. I've had, severe trauma. I have anxiety, and I just can't, nothing works, but, this works. This drug works. This behavior works. So I've, so yes, they have. And then they kind of realize that, like I said, when you get them clean, then you have to deal with the trauma, the underlying issue. And
when you say clean, you're mostly referring to people who are using substances.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, my substance abuse. Yes, clean.
Okay.
Yes,
yeah,
drug-free. Yes.
Drug-free. I know there's some debate about that, the term clean, especially in the rooms of
Yeah.
recovery. Some people find that offensive. Some people don't really understand
Yeah,
what
they
that
do.
means. And I think some people
Yeah.
take on a lot of shame around some of our clinical language
Mhm.
because they don't understand it. So I think it's important for us to kind of spell that out. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, and I think there's another thing with harm reduction also. I don't know if you've
Yes.
heard that where, well, I'm not using heroin anymore. I'm just using marijuana, and how do we manage that whole thing? It's not as bad as that, but the behavior is still there.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. So a client comes in, and you said that you see young folks too, right?
I do. I'll see teenagers. Yes.
Okay, so you see teenagers. A teenager comes in, and let's say they're using marijuana, because that's typically pretty easy for teenagers to get access to, or
Yeah, most
prescription
common
pills.
drug
Yeah,
or alcohol.
or alcohol, especially if they have it
Hmm.
already in the home. How do
Yes.
you help them understand that the substances that they're using are actually causing harm?
It's hard with teenagers because they're so peer driven. And, when you tell a teenager that it's not right to use marijuana and six of their friends do it and nothing has happened to them, um, they're looking at you like, yeah, okay, lady, you know, you know, you don't know what you're talking about. But I think it's just talking with them about very real consequences. I will use sometimes different stories that I have heard, different videos or different mediums to try to speak with them and kind of show them that, backing up what I'm saying a little bit,
Right.
where I say, this is wrong. And then I'll say, let's look at this particular story where this happened and this, do you see you know, a correlation?
Hmm.
So with teenagers, I think they're coming a lot of times because not only does the judge made them come, but their mom is sitting out there and their dad you know, uh, so they're not exactly as more willing to stop as more of an adult that kind of understands the consequences a little bit better and has felt the consequences a little bit more in their life, job loss or different things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Because the consequences, in my opinion, are what gets people to the point where they're saying, "I've had enough."
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It's they don't want to, that things have gotten really hard on them. They're in front of the court. You know, they can't keep a job. But I know that treatment works. I know it. I've
Hmm.
seen it. Hmm.
Yeah. So the teenagers that you see, have you seen a lot of trauma walking through the door?
Yes, and a lot of I think with teenagers you also see a lot of family dysfunction, and unfortunately you see a lot of behavior that they're emulating, with parents where, it's very difficult. Well, my mom smokes marijuana, so I smoke marijuana. Well, oy. So
Right.
how am I supposed to work with the teenager and tell them it's wrong when the parents are also engaging?
Right. And it doesn't mean that
Teenagers are very smart,
they are very smart. And I just wanted to say,
very smart.
it doesn't mean that the parents are abusing the substances.
Right, not necessarily because they'll hold their kids to a different standard, and maybe that's okay where they don't want their kids to have the same problems as they've had, or they can control it. They have this functional thing going on where they can engage and be okay, where a teenager just for different physiological and neuroscience stuff just doesn't.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, the teenagers are still developing,
yes, yes.
right?
So your thinking patterns are different. Their insight is different. Their realization of consequences are different. Their ability to say, "Well, I'm not going to do that much," is a little different too. Um, so they're still developing, and they're hard to work with because they, especially in groups, because a lot of times it's all about the peer.
Hmm.
And so, I don't want to talk about me because this kid that I'm sitting in class with and, I have to try. I have to see him yesterday or next weekend. I have to see him 2 weeks from now, and he's going to make fun of me
Right.
because I disclosed something. Yeah,
Peer pressure.
peer pressure.
Peer pressure has kind of been at the forefront of, drug use and abuse in schools for
Yes,
many, many years. I remember when I was in school, they had that DARE program, which I
yes,
heard is
me too.
shifting now because marijuana is legal in several of our states throughout the country. And so
Yes,
they're shifting their focus. So it sounds like it's safe to say that sometimes people are exposed to substances which they can later become addicted to because of their exposure through peer pressure and also through maybe something they may witness or experience in their family of origin.
yes, very safe to say.
Yeah, okay. So an adult comes in and sees you. Let's say they're 25 years old, maybe 25 to 30, and that was their experience growing up. And they're saying, "Look, my family used, I had a peer pressure growing up and I used and it escalated." How do you help them understand that just because that was their normal experience in their youth, that maybe not so normal now in their adulthood?
Yeah, and I think the first thing I would say to that person is, "You're 25 years old. What kind of life do you want to have?"
Okay, valid question.
Yeah, yeah, because do you want to go? You have had these experiences, and you have had, you know, parents, and you've dabbled a little bit as a teenager, but now you're older, and the rules are changing a little bit. You have to be responsible. You could be a parent soon. What kind of life do you want to have? Now that you are on your own and you can make the decisions, and I think I put it back on them. And so most of the time, most 99, they say they don't want to be involved in drugs. They understand it, and they understand what it has done, and they don't want to be involved. And so that's where the work begins.
Mm-hmm. So I really like what I'm hearing you say. It's like, what do you want to do with your life? It's like a vision.
Yeah,
What's the
yeah,
vision? And
yeah. And I
it,
don't know that we think about that too much.
no, I was just gonna say, like, most people have not been asked that question when they show up at our
Mhm.
office.
Yeah.
What's your vision? And I think, I can speak for myself personally that my vision became blurred when I had so many things that were outside of my control impacting me.
Right.
And alcohol and other behavioral addictions took over my life because I was in a lot of pain and I didn't know what
Yeah.
my vision was. And I had
Yeah.
to
And
get
it's like you
sober.
can't see.
Yeah, I had to get
Yeah,
sober
and you can't see
first.
the forest from the trees.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
So those are all contributing factors, I think, to people becoming addicted. Now, there's a lot of talk in recent months, especially since the report came out, and I can't recall exactly who released the report, but they confirmed that addiction is a brain disease. It's not a moral
Yeah.
problem. It's a brain disease. Can you speak
Mhm.
on that and how that has impacted your relationship with your clients?
And I absolutely agree with that. It's a brain disease. It's a medical condition. I always see something that we treat diabetes that's almost the same way we have to treat addiction. In the kind of the same mindset that it's a medical issue. So, in the sense of understanding that there's a process where it's a chemical, and you're putting a chemical into your body, and the chemical is changing your brain chemistry, and it is causing, and we could do a whole nother podcast on what exactly happens when certain substances
Right.
are ingested. But the bottom line is that it changes your I'm drawing a blank here, but it changes your chemical makeup, and you become where you cannot survive without the drug.
Mm-hmm.
So the drug becomes, and the best way I can explain is it hijacks your pleasure. So a client many years ago told me, he said, "I used to like playing basketball, just playing basketball. He said, now I can't play basketball unless I'm high on cocaine.
Jeez.
And so that to me I've always remembered that, whatever, that was his most favorite thing to do. That was his hobby. That was his sport. And he said he cannot do it unless he's high.
So it
that's
hijacked his reward
yeah,
circuitry.
his reward. Yeah.
Goodness.
And so it has hijacked his ability to, like we said earlier, to soothe himself, to relieve his stress, to let loose and have fun and, just be free, I guess, free out on the court. And he says, I can't do it unless I'm high anymore.
Goodness.
So.
And that's hard to break free from.
Yeah.
You've combined something that you enjoy, that you love, with a substance that is ravaging your brain and your body. Mm-hmm. And they become fused.
Yeah. And so you get confused and you think one is the other now. Yeah. And I can't play basketball unless I'm high. And I'm like, oh my God, I could never forgot that.
Wow, that's impactful. And I'm sure in your line of work, you have heard a lot of stories. You've heard you've seen probably a lot of consequences that people have faced. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
It really is.
To see this addiction destroy not just the person's life, but maybe the people around them too.
Yeah, it really is heartbreaking. Yeah. It really is.
Have you seen a family ravaged by addiction, meaning maybe the identified patient comes in, but also their mom's addicted, their kid's addicted, the grandma and grandpa were addicted? Have you seen that?
Yeah, many times. Most recently with a lot of the heroin addiction that we have in our area. And in, I think throughout the country it's becoming more of a thing, but I have seen it, and where the kids will be, and sometimes it's different substances, or there will be a family that's, it's prescriptions, or then it will be, there's, the heroin addiction or something, but you do see, I do see it quite often. Or the client will come in and then you will talk with them, and we kind of talk about their family, and they will say, my mom did this, or my dad was addicted. And usually if it's an adult, there is one parent or some sort of an uncle or grandmother that's been addicted.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always have to be the same substance, or even sometimes it's behavior, but there's something.
Right, because sometimes the substance is not as easy to get to as a behavior that you have and that you do on a regular basis. Like, I treat people who struggle with sex addiction. Well, all human beings are sexual.
Right.
And so my struggle is helping people understand is that, yes, you're not injecting a chemical into your body, but you are actually manipulating the chemicals already in your brain.
Right.
To get that high.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a long time to get people to understand that. And sometimes they have to have additional consequences before they get it.
They do. Addicts will always say that they have to hit rock bottom. You'll hear them say that often, is I have to hit rock bottom. And then as a therapist, just when you think they've hit rock bottom, you think, oh no, they can't. Something else happens, and it's crushing sometimes to watch somebody. And
it's hard.
It's very hard. It's very hard.
Because we have
because you just want to just tell them stop.
Right. Because we can't take it all on. Right?
No.
We have like 50 minutes with a person, sometimes maybe an hour and a half if you're doing a group. And we maybe see them every week. We can't take all of their stuff on and make it ours. We can hold it for a limited time and support them when they're in front of us, and care and have concern for their well-being. But, I see 20 to 24 people a week. I'm not sure how many you see, but that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. About that. Not all of them are in recovery, but all of them have other things going on too, and you do think about it afterwards a little bit. But the thing is that you can't tell anybody either.
Right.
can't come home and say, "Hey, husband, let me tell you about this session today."
Right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you can't do that. You got to get good supervision or
And
good consultation.
consult groups are
Yeah,
helpful. Yeah,
consults. Yes, good consults so
absolutely.
you can get some support.
Yeah. And I think what's also important for the client who is suffering from addiction is to get into some sort of group. It doesn't have to be
Absolutely.
12 step, but it really needs
Mm-mm.
to be focused on recovery efforts. I can't
Yes.
stress that enough.
Yes. I think it's a good. Such a learning community, and I tell you, I've seen so many great groups that are so supportive. Once you get a couple people in there, and I have seen, with the women I work with, that they just, I feel like I'm almost a side. I'm just the flower on the wall, and you get them in there, and they just talk, and they get themselves through it, and they get each other through it, and it's amazing.
Yeah, they become the
Um,
facilitators.
yeah,
Yeah, and they support
um,
one another. And, addiction thrives in isolation, but it can be
yes,
combated with a community,
mhm,
right? We
yeah.
don't have to do it alone.
There's something about once somebody puts themselves out there, there are people to catch them, and I think it's wonderful.
I love that.
Yeah, once they get hooked up with a group, and you're right, it doesn't have to be a 12-step, just a treatment group, um, but it's important
Hmm.
because you can give feedback and you can receive feedback, um,
Yeah.
and you talk with people that have a similar story.
Right. I think that's what's really important is to know that I'm not alone. There's someone sitting
Right.
next to me or across from me who has a similar story. And it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
word for word because we have our own individual experience. But listen for the themes, I say, because they are
Yeah.
very similar.
Yeah, and the shame goes away because, as you said, there's a lot of a shame and addiction, and there is, and no matter what type, the shame goes away because you're seeing someone that's, like you said, the circumstances are different, but the theme is there.
Right. Right. So I'm curious, how long does someone typically work with you?
Um, I try to do usually 6 to 12 months. I think but I think recovery is a lifelong journey. But I think sometimes people in therapy about 6 to 12 months, maybe a little longer,
Mm-hmm.
if
Depending on
there's
what's
some
happening.
trauma. Yeah, depending on what's happening. I'm a big proponent of doing group and individual work because I want to help people, get through with the trauma. Maybe some of the things that they won't talk about in group, some of those underlying issues. Um, I do think that if you're in addiction, you should be in. I do feel like individual therapy and group therapy is a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I support that. And
Yeah.
the trauma piece, it's interesting because a lot of people will come in and they'll tell me their stories, and I'm like, oh my God, that sounds horrible. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, that's not that bad. I'm like,
Right.
yeah, it is.
Yeah, and you wonder how in the world, given being in this field has given me such an appreciation for my fellow man. Is that you walk around and you can walk down a city street and you can see so many people, and you just don't know
Yep.
half of it. You don't, and I have a very diverse clientele, and I'm very grateful. And you come in and by the grace of God, go high because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people struggling with a lot of things
And we
out
don't know.
there,
And we don't know
and you
unless they
don't know.
tell us or we ask. And
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes it's but you're right. Sometimes I think, how in the world, I just when you hear a story, you think you're about the most resilient person I have met in my life because I don't know if I could go through what you went through.
oh, yeah, I'm quick to tell a
You know?
client that. Like, yeah, I wouldn't have been able to deal with that.
Right. I tell them and they look at me like, "What?" I'm like, "No, you've been dealing with this for how long? And you haven't. This is the first person I'm the first person you've told."
Right. Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm blessed to have the job that I have, And
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, it's the best thing that I've ever done. And
Me
being
too.
someone in recovery and helping people who are seeking recovery is a true blessing for me because it helps me stay sober too. Because I
Mhm.
understand the importance of the work that I do, both professionally and personally.
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree.
So
I would agree. I
impactful.
think it's a gift. I think it's a gift to do what we do.
Yes, it is a gift. Now, before we part, I want to check in to see if you have any words of wisdom that you could impart to our audience who may be
Words of
struggling
wisdom.
or needing some insight. What do you have to offer?
Hmm. Words of wisdom. I have a saying on my wall, and this is my favorite saying that I have to remind myself, even when I have some things that I want to change about myself. And it's a thing that my supervisor, my LCW supervisor, who has always told me, and it's just a life truth. And I think the saying is, if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, so that just means if you don't change anything, then it's going to stay the same, which is everybody's like, well, of course, that yeah. But then I'm like, but think about it. What are you going to change? Because if you don't change anything, if you don't take a leap, if you don't step out in faith, if you don't, you know, don't smoke that joint or don't do that behavior, then nothing will change. You're going to come in next week and it's going to be the same. So what are you going to do to make a small baby step? And so I think that's my big mantra
Yeah.
is if you change nothing, then nothing changes.
Right. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I need to write that down.
Yeah, that's my big. Yeah. Well,
Well, Lisa, thank you so much. I think that's a fabulous way to end today's episode is to
Oh,
say
you're very welcome.
if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Yeah.
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 Well, let's hope that everyone out there listening will make a decision to make a change, no matter
Yes.
what has brought them in to either your office, my office, or there's, at some agency somewhere. It doesn't matter as long as you're willing to make a change.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think recovery in any shape or form is one of the hardest things that anybody can do. And I have so much respect for somebody that takes that journey. I can't even, I'm humbled every day by being able to work with folks in any type of recovery.
Yes. Well, thank you for the work that you do. We all greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Making an Addict. For all my listeners, I have a special gift for you. I created a 7 steps guide to power up your recovery, and you can access it today. Go to bit.ly/7stepsguide. That's bit.ly/7 steps with an S guide. Go ahead and go there now and get your free guide. Sign up for the newsletter and it will be sent to you in your email. Take care. That was such a fun show. I really appreciated having Lisa on today. Lisa, thank you, and please come back sometime. I thoroughly enjoyed our talk. Guys, if you want to get in touch with Lisa, please follow her on social media. You can reach her on Facebook at Lisa Dewey. That's LisaDuezLCSW, and that's on Facebook. And she's also on Instagram at the same handle, Lisa Dewey LCSW, and you can go to her website at lisadewey.com. Make sure you follow Lisa and you will get some great insight from her and the practice that she has over in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Thanks again. Thank you for joining the discussion today on Making an Addict. In closing, I want you to understand that there are various opinions about addiction and what makes someone an addict. The opinions expressed here on today's show are those of the person who made them. I suggest you take what you heard, process it, and decide for yourselves what you believe in. If you have feedback or want to tell your story on the show, let me know by emailing makinganaddict@gmail.com, or you can reach me on social media. Again, I'm on Facebook and Twitter at DJBurr1022 and the DJ Burr on Instagram. Lastly, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be of service. Recovery saved my life, and I will be forever grateful. I will keep giving back every opportunity I am given. Tune in next time to witness our ongoing discussion on Making an Addict. Making an Addict is produced by the Recovery Legacy Network, bringing you recovery on all fronts. Learn more at recoverylegacynetwork.com. Today's show featured music by CDK.